I mentioned what Pro Football Focus had thought of Ryan Kerrigan, and maybe you can talk about it because we're wondering whether there's value in trading a guy who doesn't get on the field much, but if you look at the percentage of hurries and quarterback hits and those type of things, it looks like he's a really good player.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think it's really, an indictment on Kerrigan's play at this point of his career, and it's more so the reality that this Washington football team defensive line, I mean, when you're this bad as kind of they've been for the past half decade and you're spending almost every first-round pick on defensive line, I mean, it's easy to see why they, just dominated that Cowboys game. They dominated the Eagles in week one. When teams can't match up with them on the line of scrimmage when they're on defense, I mean, they're just going to be winning these games. It truly is a situation where I wouldn't call them the 2019 49ers. We're not seeing the same sort of, schematic goodness or firepower on the offensive side of the ball. But, I mean, this defensive line truly can take over games. So, yeah, I don't think Kerrigan's washed at all. I think he could go to a contender, still supply, plenty of goodness, even if he ends up playing, one of these more just get him on the field, in prime pass rush situations. I don't think he's washed by any stretch of the imagination. It's just the reality that, Chase Young, Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, the list goes on and on of these guys that Washington already has. So it's wild to have that embarrassment of riches where Ryan Kerrigan does become expendable, but I think that's the situation that Washington is looking at right now.
Ian, what did you make of the Antonio Gibson bell cow treatment he got this past week? 20 carries, goes over 100, finds the end zone. Probably more a function of the fact that they were just bleeding the clock with the lead, but you'd like to see that sort of usage from Gibson, even though they like to throw McKissick in there as well, and even sprinkle in some Peyton Barber so they can get 3 yards, 3 yards a pop with him. But Gibson looked really good this past week.
Yeah, you need 3 yards, Peyton Barber will get you 3 yards. You need 4 yards, Peyton Barber will get you 3 yards. So that's just kind of the running back he's been with Washington this year. So the 20 carries were awesome for Gibson, and he only had one target, but we've seen them get him more involved in the pass game recently. The problem is he just truly isn't pulling away from McKissick yet. I mean, even last week with the Washington football team, commanding that whole game, having, more positive game script, and they'll probably see again this season, he only played 50% of the offensive snaps. I mean, McKissick was literally out there every bit as often as Gibson, even though Gibson was the one getting the more touches. It's fine. I mean, Gibson with his, touch role where he's getting 15 to 20 per week, that's valuable. He'll be a weekly, top 20, top 24 option at the position with that. But it's just the reality that, his ceiling is kind of having that true Christian McCaffrey never leave the field role, because coming into this year, Gibson being this, wide receiver convert from college, it was reasonable not to expect him to kind of immediately get this early down work on the offense. But Peyton Barber, other than this week when, again, they were up by so much, he's really been phased out of the offense for the most part. So the fact that Gibson already has the early down role is really good because, we know what he can do receiving. Not to hate on J.D. McKissick, but it seems like some point, they're going to phase him out, really let Gibson run away with his entire backfield. If you look at only the touches from last week, you might have thought that already happened. But I think, last week's performance was more of a result of them just really getting up quickly on the scoreboard. If there's a game, next week where they're going to be behind a little bit more often, I think we'll probably see McKissick close that touch count. It's unfortunate that he's not going to be, this weekly RB1 like we were hoping for sooner rather than later, but it's still a valuable guy to have on the fantasy bench.
If you have CeeDee Lamb, you can't play him anymore, I don't think, especially after the way, especially this week with DiNucci throwing to him, but he was targeted 5 times against Washington and dropped like 4 of them. I mean, he was just bad.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it's hard to expect anything from this Cowboys offense at this point. What made them so good from really 2014 up until, Dak getting injured this year, just, even losing Romo, losing DeMarco Murray, Des Bryant, even after they lost other stars, they continued to put up points because their entire offensive line was always filled with these world beaters. And now you take away Tyron Smith, La'el Collins, Travis Frederick retired, his replacement, Joe Looney's on IR, and finally the nail in the coffin was last week, Zach Martin missing the game with a concussion. I mean, how long did we have to hear about this Cowboys, juggernaut offensive line filled with first-round picks? That's a thing of the past. So, it's one of these things where we hyped up Andy Dalton coming in as, having the best skill position talents of his career. I'm not too worried about CeeDee Lamb moving forward. I think he's shown enough this year to, fully realize that he's going to be one of the next big things at the wide receiver position, whether or not he was good in week 6 or not. But I just think that right now with this offensive line playing as bad as it is and as banged up as it is, it's really tough to expect anything from anyone other than Ezekiel Elliott and Amari Cooper. And those guys, I mean, they're pretty much just winning on volume alone at this point.